eviction advocate Tanner and yourself testifying against the bill.
That's correct. All right. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Mark Melton. By day, I'm a partner in a big international law firm where I usually practice tax law for large corporations and private equity funds. Ironically, in some ways, buying and selling billions of dollars worth of multifamily properties all across the United States every year. When COVID began, I, by complete accident and fluke, fell into a pro bono project representing tenants facing eviction in Dallas County. I didn't mean to, but it's turned into a full-fledged nonprofit now called the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center, where we have 8 full-time lawyers on staff. All we do is represent tenants for free that are facing eviction in Dallas County. To date, we have helped more than 12,000 families since COVID began. I have a front row seat to the eviction crisis in North Texas, and I'd just like to share some things that I have learned in my observations over the last 3 years. Someone earlier mentioned that our JP courts are supposed to be fair, efficient, and predictable. They are efficient and they are predictable. They are not fair. These are injustice courts. Justice is the last thing that usually happens in them. I have data, and I'm happy to share it with you, that shows that for every 100 evictions that we issue in Dallas County, the tenant should have won 85 of them. We also timed eviction hearings in Dallas County in a court watch study. The average length of an eviction hearing in Dallas County is 3 minutes and 59 seconds. We spend fewer than 4 minutes to determine whether we're going to kick a person out into the street, and we get it wrong 85% of the time. That's the backdrop against which these types of laws need to be considered. This isn't an even playing field. We're having a policy discussion as if things are fair. They're not fair at all. The deck is stacked against the tenants. All the laws that the state legislature has passed are specifically for the purpose of benefiting the landlords. 2035, this bill was written by the Texas Apartment Association, not because they care about a patchwork of laws. They don't want any impediment to their ability to evict anyone, period. The patchwork of laws argument is asinine. Their entire business is built around a patchwork of laws. When they go build an apartment complex, zoning laws, patchwork, different in every city. Minimum building standards, patchwork, different in every city. Plumbing codes, fire codes, all the codes, different in every city. Everything is a patchwork of laws. You know what? It works just fine. There is nothing inherently different or important about evictions that requires a statewide universal policy. They just want to be able to evict as easy as possible, period. That's what this is about.
Thank you, members. Any questions for Mr. Madam Chair Nyave?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mark, for your testimony. I hope you're okay with me sharing with my colleagues some of your background and what you and the group of attorneys in Dallas have done and what it means for the residents in our city. The pandemic, I think it was one of those special times where we saw our city come together. Hundreds of lawyers stepped up to volunteer pro bono, wanting to do something when they saw that folks were about to be evicted. I think it's special, I think it's rare. Because of that, Mark and the group have been recognized nationally by the American Bar Association for their work. You didn't have to do this. You practiced tax law at a big firm. And so I think for y'all have been there anytime we have called on y'all, also for residents in our district, landlords that were being sued by the city because of the conditions of apartment complexes. So I want to talk about the impact of this legislation on our neighborhoods, the families in our districts, and what y'all are seeing at the courthouses and the process. So, and we did some research with respect to the due process. So a lot of the folks that would not have counsel, what is the data with respect to them getting evicted when they don't have counsel compared to when they do?
So if a tenant shows up with a lawyer, they get evicted 10% of the time. If they show up without one, they get evicted 80% of the time. Now the whole point of a JP court is to avoid the expense of lawyers and expensive litigation, but when you've got a court system that gets such disparate answers based on whether someone that actually knows the law is there to hold the courts accountable versus not, that's a huge problem. The JP courts are one of the largest contributors to generational poverty in the state of Texas. They are complicit in the illegal eviction of tens of thousands, if not millions of Texans a year. And that's not hyperbole. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not a paid hand. I don't own real estate. This has no impact on my pocketbook whatsoever. I'm not a paid lobbyist. In fact, I pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to support the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center to make sure we can continue to do our work. It costs me money to do this for free. So when I come here and I tell you things are not fair, it's not because I have a bias or some interest that I want you to protect, or all the other things that have been said in this room today that have made my head almost explode. What I'm telling you is true. The system is unfair. Landlords already have such a huge advantage. All these local ordinances do is make it just a tiny bit less unfair to the tenants. And you want me to talk about what you asked? Yes, ma'am. So, if you have the lawyers that are representing tenants win a huge number of cases. In our case, last year we represented almost 2,500 tenants, just the lawyers that are at our Eviction Action Center, and that's full through trial in eviction courts all the time. We won 94% of those cases. Now, I think a lot of you are lawyers, but no one should win 94% of their cases. That's ridiculous. But the reason that we do, and we went on such a high rate, in fact, the year before won 97%, the only reason we won 94% this last year was because the landlords are starting to learn what the rules are because we are holding their feet to the fire in these courtrooms. The reason we win is because they never, ever, 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 ever follow the rules. All this stuff that's in the property code, use it to start a fire. Nobody follows them. Courts don't force them to. And we just kick tenants out of the street. That's what the Texas legislature is doing. So do I trust the Texas legislature to make the rules? Or a local government that has to sit there and look at the guy sitting on the street corner? Or more often than not, 70% of the time, the mom with her kids? I'll trust the local people.
Some of the justices of the peace are lawyers, some are not. Regardless of that, they are supposed to follow what's in the property code, but you're finding that because landlords aren't complying even with what is in the books in the property code, that folks are being, it's like the law is being disregarded is what you're saying. So a person's appeal, you can speak to that, and then if they wanted to appeal, what process, and then how much do they have to come out of out-of-pocket to appeal? So
if you apply these percentages, right, and you take the same percentages that a represented tenant had and you apply those across the people that did not have a lawyer. And when we did this study, we actually isolated it just to the people that actually showed up, right? So they at least took the time to come to court and defend themselves. They just didn't have a lawyer. If you took the results for the represented group and applied it to the unrepresented group, there would have been almost 14,000 fewer evictions in Dallas County over an 18-month period in September of 2022. That's 85% of those cases, right? We're not making that number up. That's based on actual statistical data. Now, to prove that, as Mark Twain said, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And so I thought, well, this is a nice model. How do we validate it? So we literally pulled 100% of the eviction appeals for the 12 months ending May of 2022. There were 1,534 or 83, I can't remember now, but 1,500 and something appeals. We pulled every single judgment from the county courts of law for those appeals so we could see what happened. And we said that there's an 80 to 85% error rate at the JP court. Guess how many times that the landlord won after they won at the JP court? How many times did they win out of 100% of the universe of the cases at the county court of law? 20%. They won 20% of the cases. That's not a statistical sample. That was every single case. So we got a serious problem. We're violating the constitutional rights of every tenant in this state every single day. And no one's talking about that. We're talking about a right to cure. We're talking, you know what a right to cure is? It's a right to pay your rent. We're having a fight about whether I should be able to pay my rent. That's how bad it is for tenants. Think about that. Just this conversation demonstrates the bias against tenants and for landlords, all because they came in this room and said, we don't like it, kill it. Because we don't want any impediment in our ability to evict. They say we're in the business of renting, not of evicting. Well, they still filed 40,000 evictions in the last 12 months, just in Dallas County. I don't care what business you're in. I've got a whole bunch of people sitting in Dallas County that are getting thrown out. Most of them single mothers. Some of you might not care about that part, but you should care about the rule of law. I grew up in Oklahoma as a super conservative, red state Republican. I thought the rule of law mattered. I thought the Constitution mattered. Doesn't matter in Texas, not if you're a tenant. Not unless you have the money to hire a lawyer to defend your rights, in which case you will win 90% of the time, or you're lucky enough to get some other lawyer to come volunteer to represent you for free. Is that justice? I don't think so.
Thank you.
Representative Isaac?
Yes, you spoke about a patchwork of ordinances. Do you believe that predictability is good for business?
I don't believe this has anything to do with predictability. The one thing we know about an apartment complex is it's not going to jump up and walk from one jurisdiction to another and be subject to more than one set of rules. If it's in the city of Dallas, it's going to be subject to the city of Dallas ordinance. It's not going to be subject to Houston or wherever else. That's completely predictable.
If you have a business and you don't know that you can evict someone, you're gonna have to, it's unpredictable, and you're gonna have to make concessions for not being able to collect. So when you have predictability, it makes it easier to do business, which means it's cheaper. When you don't, it makes it more expensive, harder to do business.
Well, I mean, how much are we willing to give up in lower rents to satisfy our craving to just violate at will the constitutional rights of tenants? What is the price tag on it?
If we continue like this, rates are gonna go up. Rent is
Sure,
gonna go up.
they already went up,
They will continue to do that.
but not because of this. They've gone up 22% in Dallas County in the last 2.5 years. And if you look at just the lower, deeper affordability bands, it went up 40 to 50%, not because of a local ordinance. It had nothing to do with it. Completely unrelated. These are the same arguments that chemical companies made, that everybody else made when they were subject to huge litigation. If you force us to follow the rules and then take care of the consumer, things are gonna get more expensive. People might die, sure, but it's gonna be more expensive. That's the exact same argument we're making here. People might have to pay a little bit more in rent. People will die in the streets. I get multiple calls a month from some poor mom or dad living in a Walmart parking lot in their car.
You just said people might have to pay more in rent. Yes, that's the problem.
I agree.
You won't be able to afford, you can't afford it now, they're not gonna be able to afford it if we keep going like we're going now.
But this rule has been there for 2 years in Dallas. This rule, this is not the cause of the rent increase. I have a whole paper on it, if you'd like me to send it to you, on the increase in the money supply, and this is what it actually cost it. But that's probably for another time or place. The local ordinances didn't cause the rent to go up. The rent already went up. So to sit here and say, you're gonna cause the rents to go up, well, that's happening. Unrelated. So why shouldn't we have local rules that protect tenants in an environment of raising rents and inflation? Otherwise, the alternative is do nothing. They end up in the backseat of their car in a Walmart parking lot with their kids. That's the alternative. So high rent, low rent, people are gonna be harmed if you guys pass this law, period.
Members, any questions? Vice Chair Massoud?
Just want to make sure I'm understanding your argument. So is it your position that localities ought to have the strike that. Strike it on the record.
I've stricken it from my house. Go ahead.
Sorry, creature I haven't. Is it your position that the cities currently have, if I pull up the bill, I apologize, I didn't have it right in front of me, but is it your position that cities right now have the authority to enact ordinances relating to the eviction process?
Certain ways, yes. So home rule cities in the state of Texas are constitutionally permitted to make any law that they want, that the legislature has not specifically told them that they can't. That is the Constitution of the state of Texas, as validated by the Supreme Court of the state of Texas many, many times. What this law is doing is it is intentionally trying to have the legislature say affirmatively, cities, you can't do this, right? To override the constitutional starting point of you can do whatever you want. Now, this business about we're rewriting the property code is not true at all. The property code the entire time already contemplated this kind of thing happening. And in fact, that's what the City of Dallas ordinance did, was it played off of section 2405E of the Texas Property Code, which says, if your lease or an applicable law requires a notice of proposed eviction, you can't send the notice to vacate until after the time to respond to the notice of proposed eviction.
So
All we
the
did was-
issue that they addressed was the notice, or the opportunity to cure, is that right?
Well, not the initial ordinance. The initial ordinance is played in with the property. The property code does not address a right to cure. It doesn't permit it, and it doesn't prohibit it.
Okay. So they, because it didn't permit it, didn't prohibit it, they did it. And they were able to do it because the legislature had not said no, is that
That's
right?
That's correct.
Now, does the current law allow, Dallas County, flexibility to do other, regulations concerning the eviction process? Perhaps, changing burdens of proof, or evidentiary standing, or notice of a hearing, or, providing counsel, or a host of other things. I could go on and on and on, but does the law provide them flexibility to do that?
I think some of those things, yes. Now, to the extent that the legislature has made a rule, right? Home rule cities can pass a law that is, there's no such thing as field preemption in Texas, right? So just because the state has entered the field of regulation does not mean that a home rule city can't also enter the same field. Now, if you've got a rule of civil procedure, for example, that cites a specific timeline or something like that, the city clearly couldn't come in and pass a rule that was directly contradictory to what the legislature had passed. No one's done that, though.
So is it your contention of all the issues that you raised about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like you were saying there were plenty of issues with the process for evictions Dallas County, is that?
That's correct.
All right. So am I fair in summarizing your testimony that you thought that there were many, many issues with the eviction process utilized in Dallas County, is that correct?
Well, the problems are with the process utilized across the entire state of Texas.
Okay, so that's what I was wanting to get at. Was it your concern that the process that is in place in the state has issues, or is it that these are unique issues to Dallas County that you don't see in other areas?
Well, we certainly have unique issues. We've got higher poverty rates than rural areas, for sure. We've got a whole lot of people that we've got to figure out how to support and lift up, right? Most of these people that we deal with, by the way, I deal with the poorest of the poor. I'm in the neighborhoods. I'm not sitting in my ivory tower, 30th floor office suite thinking about this stuff, looking out over the city, right? We're sitting in these apartment complexes with these people in their neighborhoods. They're working their butts off. Most of them multiple jobs. Same job they had 3 years ago, by the way, but bread costs more, milk costs more, gas costs more, rent costs more, everything costs more.
Do you think Dallas County can do more than it's currently doing?
Sure,
You think it should?
absolutely.
You think the legislature can do more than it's currently doing?
I sure wish it would.
You think you should?
Absolutely.
Is there anything about this bill that prohibits the legislature from doing more?
Well, no, but there's,
Is there anything about this bill that would, I guess the question I have in my mind is that the counties are supposed to have all this authority and they ought to be doing all these things and they currently have power to do all these things. Why is it so bad? And if it's so bad because of the state procedure, shouldn't we have a better state procedure? And doesn't that go to the argument that we ought to make it better for everybody, and the body that's able to do that is the state legislature, but not localities?
Vice Chair, let's not pretend the state legislature is going to. That's the point.
I'm here, y'all want to make it better? There, done. There we go. So bring the bills, let's hear them. But I don't see how you've got such an issue with a bill that simply says that we're going to have a predictable model that the state legislature to step in. I get all of these arguments about, the cure and what's there now. I mean, if these rules weren't there, if the cities had not done any of this, those arguments would totally not exist. The fact of the matter is, the state of Texas, through the legislature, has the authority to step in and provide a reasonable and fair process for tenants, and we should. We have the power, we should. Sovereignty rests with the state. Sovereignty rests with the state, and the state ought to deliver. a fair system for all tenants so that it doesn't matter which zip code you're in.
I would support that, sir.
Members, any more questions for this witness? All right, thank you.